Welcome to All Things Savannah, our weekly program about the people, history, stories, and inside information about the hostess city. I'm Frank Morrow, along with Danielle Oak.
Good morning. We have Father Jameson with us this morning. Father Jonathan Jameson is the Associate Rector at St. John's Episcopal Church on Madison Square in Savannah. Welcome to All Things Savannah.
Very happy to be here with you all this morning.
So we've got lots of questions.
Excellent.
We are, first of all, I have to say we're thrilled to have you. I am personally thrilled to have you because you're an inspiration at St. John's Church, St. John's Episcopal Church in Savannah, and I happen to go to this church. So Father Jameson has done a lot of really terrific things at the church, and I really thought it would be a great interview today to have him on.
So you have a varied career, to say the least.
Certainly, yeah.
We'll start in a non-traditional place. Everybody thinks we're going to open up with religion or something, but we're going to talk about music.
Yeah.
Because you're a musician.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the inspiration for a musical career, and then maybe we can get into how you sort of blended at least two careers together.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in San Diego, and when I was in 6th grade, I went to see a band called MXPX. They're sort of a Christian punk band, and as soon as me and my friends saw this band, we said, we're starting a punk band. So from that point on, music became a larger and larger part of my life. By the time I was in high school, I was in a band that was playing regionally, and then the day after I graduated high school, I left for tour for 3 months with the band.
Oh, really?
Wow!
Yeah,
Right
and toured with them for several years. That band sort of fell apart, and then in 2006, the drummer and I formed a band called Delta Spirit, and then Delta Spirit toured nationally and internationally for a number of years. We were still a band technically, although I'm busy doing some other things currently. But it's one of the great joys of my life, playing music.
What instruments do you play?
I play bass in the band. I've always played bass. I fool around with guitar and drums, and I wish that I learned how to play piano, but I didn't. And I've sung much more being a priest than I ever sung in the band. So that's an interesting thing, yeah.
Inspiration for music younger in life? Anything that was really there early?
My parents weren't really big music people, so we sort of listened to like contemporary Christian music, which is not usually the best music. And so I sort of discovered, I got really, when I was in junior high and then high school, got very into sort of punk and hardcore, and then sort of emo, indie rock, all these things. So that sort of developed on my own later. The first band that I was in was called Noise Ratchet, and it was sort of a, for lack of a better term, sort of an emo band. And we eventually signed to Rick Rubin's label, American Recordings, made a very expensive album, and then it fell apart.
That's the life.
There you go. Yeah, it was back when labels would give you lots of money. They don't do that anymore. And then as that was happening, my musical interest started shifting, and I got a bit more into better music, I want to say. So, better indie rock. I got into sort of Serge Gainsbourg and Air, and sort of Bob Dylan, and so just like some deeper, better music. I still love some of the stuff I was into as a teenager, but but so when we started Delta Spirit, we loved like Neil Young, we loved The Strokes, we loved Bob Dylan, we loved My Morning Jacket, so these sort of like bands that were sort of figuring out a way to do some sort of rootsy music, but sort of making it modern, and
a lot of messaging in that music.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there's a sort of history of protest songs, things like that, and all of us were sort of the band. Neither of the bands were Christian bands, but Delta Spirit particularly was there was a sort of spiritual background there, but it was certainly we toured clubs and venues and not churches and things like that. So it was that whole time, though, I was raised in a Christian in a sort of non-denominational setting, and always like trusted that that was true, and as I toured, that I remained a Christian. So, and strangely enough, I don't, maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but part of the story eventually of later call towards ministry was the fact that when I started touring, it was before, by God's grace, the advent of the iPhone. So our choices were you had a Game Boy or you read book. And so I wasn't a video game guy, so I read books, and that's what sort of started me on a deeper move into theology, and then eventually, getting signs that maybe I had a calling to ministry. So
Well, that's a good segue.
yeah.
Yeah. So clearly you are a musician. There's just dyed in the wool. You are. That's your gene. That's
now that I'm in a setting where there's choral music and all of this, I feel weird calling myself a musician. I'm a sort of punk bassist that can't read music, that can barely sing, but music has been a huge part of my life, certainly. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So I'm going to take a little leap here and talk about where you've been in the world.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Montreal. You were in Montreal for a while.
Yeah.
And to just sort of clarify too, you are married.
Yes. Yep. Married. So I'm from San Diego. My wife is from Philadelphia. We met each other in Los Angeles, and then we moved to New York with the band. Sort of shifted there, and she got a job there. She's in fashion. She's a creative director at a fashion brand. And our son was born in New York City. Then we moved back to LA. Our daughter was born there, and then more recently Montreal for 4 years.
Okay,
So,
and that's where you did your study.
Yes, I did some studies in Wisconsin at the Neshoda
right.
House, which is a wonderful seminary, and then I did my MDiv at McGill University in Montreal. So
Okay.
sort of accidentally, but because my wife moved there. We moved there for my wife's job actually, and then I sort of ended up doing the studies there. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So do either of you speak French?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
So she was busy working, and I was
Yeah.
busy studying. But our kids learned French when they were there, and now they've sadly forgotten all of it. It's terrible.
Oh.
So,
Well,
yeah.
at least they learned it, I
They learned
suppose,
it. Maybe it's deep back in their sort of subconscious, but it was very cool. It was an interesting experience in that way.
So what brings you to Savannah, and when does that happen, and how does that happen?
Well, okay, so I was finishing up studies, and I was on the sort of ordination track. So there's in the Episcopal Church, there's a sort of process towards ordination. One has a sense of call, and then they speak to their rector, and then the rector speaks to the bishop, and all this takes a long time. And that whole time, I was also moving from city to city, which messes up this whole process. But finally, all that was working itself out. I was I'd eventually been ordained a deacon while living in Montreal, and wrapping up studies and starting to think about what was next. And we'd also just been through COVID, and so as much as we loved Montreal, we knew we wanted to move somewhere else, likely in the States, be closer to family. And a friend put me in touch with Father Dunbar, the rector here at St. John's Church, and I thought that would be incredible, but there's no way. How's my wife going to get a job? This is great, but probably won't work out. And eventually we kept meeting, we kept talking, and every time I thought, it's impossible, it would be amazing, but it's impossible.
Yeah.
And quite literally, God kept opening doors and made a way for it to be possible, and we love it. We just couldn't be more thrilled. I mean, it's I'm getting ahead here too, but what a beautiful city. What a wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
A church that's downtown in a sort of lively place, but a smaller community. Like we're used to,
Right.
New York,
Yeah.
LA, Montreal, all these
Huge.
are larger metropolitan
Yeah.
cities, and we were looking forward to a sort of more tight-knit community. So other than the sand gnats, I mean, Savannah has it all. So, yeah.
Well, you can't have everything.
That's it.
Want to remind everybody you are watching All Things Savannah. We are coming to you from the Bluff Hotel, 630 West Bay Street, historic district, downtown Savannah, right where the Father's Church is here. And we're looking at a wonderful interview here with Father Jonathan Jameson. He is the associate rector at St. John's Episcopal Church. Good conversation, getting acclimated on how we ended up here. You go next.
Yeah, so my question has to do with art.
Great.
And I know this is something close to your heart
Yeah.
as well. And Savannah is an art-filled city.
Yeah.
We have college here that's dedicated to art, and so there's a really lively presence here in the city. Lots of students and lots of artists. So one of the things that I loved when Father Jameson came to Savannah was you just jumped right in the pool. You didn't even wait. We had art there's an area of the church called the Mall. It's sort of like a cloister.
Yeah.
And I think you hadn't been here for even 3 months.
No.
And
Yeah.
you managed to get art up in
Yeah.
that area,
Wow.
like outside.
Impressive.
Tell us about that.
In
And
it-
how
in
did
it-
that connection happen? And
Yeah, and somewhat modern art in a very historic setting. So I wasn't
Yes.
sure if parishioners were going to be up for that. And to my great joy, they've just been so supportive. So I don't know. I mean, for me, a ministry needs to take into account the context that you find yourself in, and like you said, Savannah is a city that's surrounded by art. I mean, our church campus is surrounded by SCAD's campus, right? And so, the church, if we're going to think historically, has been one of the great supporters of art in the Western world for millennia, right? So it's unfortunate it's not that as much anymore, but I see what we're doing as a sort of some continuity with that sort of highlighting the importance of art, the importance of beauty and transcendence in a sort of world where something to slow us down, where we're so tempted to just be distracted constantly. Art slows us down. Art makes us think, gets us outside of ourselves, and so I think any opportunity to do that is good. So, yeah.
And then recently, too, we had one of your colleagues visit, who's a photographer.
Yes, yeah.
Who has work where? At the Met in New York City?
London Portrait Gallery.
Okay, London.
Yes, and he's done some other. I mean, it's possible he's done some things there. He's been published in Oxford American and some other sort of quarterlies, and he's just a wonderful photographer. His name's Father Bertie Pearson. He's
Pearson,
at St.
right.
Albans in D.C., and he's also a DJ too.
Nothing wrong with that. That's a very honorable profession, if I must say so myself.
He and another Episcopal priest have put out a 10-inch vinyl that's called Jazz and Birdie, and on the cover it's a cartoon of them in their surplices and stoles, and it's like deep house, like deep house is probably not. He'd correct me, but it's sort of like primitive house music. Super cool. Like Jazz, the other priest, he'd been featured on Vice, and he's on these sort of like fancy mixtape compilations in Paris. So they're just like bizarre, wild guys. So Father Bertie is one of these sort of guys who's just like a wonderful priest, like a beautiful mind, and also just this strange creative dude. So it's been great to have. It was cool to have him down, and he did 2 series for us. He did a series of altars. Sort of representational works, and then he did a series of portraits, and sort of reflecting on the nature of the fact that God took flesh in the incarnation, and so when we look at another human face, we can contemplate God's God's strange work in taking on human nature in the incarnation. So it was really beautiful. It was good to have him. Yeah.
So I love that connection, though. I love that back and forth between art and spirituality, and that's not a new thing. It's not, it's not that anyone else has not explored that before. But to see that walk into the doors of your own church is a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah.
And really grateful and find that really exciting. So, and thinking too about music and art and spirituality, those things are inseparable. Really.
Yes, yeah.
And I love how you've been able to pull that all together and bring that into our particular church parish.
It's been a joy, and people have been supportive, and it's fun. I mean, it's tough as a church. People can think you're sort of only open for 2 hours on Sunday, but we're always there. We're part of this community, and we want to sort of let the community know that this is their space too, right? And so in the summer we've been having concerts. We'll have concerts again this summer out in the mall area, and so with like sort of no agenda, like simply just having good music,
Yeah.
offering something to the community
Great.
for
Yeah.
free. So opportunities for fellowship and friendship, and like all of that is connected to faith and just its goodness, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
A little bit of a more serious
Sure,
question
yeah.
regarding priesthood.
Certainly. Yep.
It's a two-parter.
All right.
The most rewarding part of the priesthood for you.
You know, on one hand, there's sort of like the great privilege of serving at the altar, which is sort of a strange, mystical priestly duty. That's sort of just an awesome thing in the sort of true sense of the word awesome. But like more practically, I just love being able to talk with people. Like even this, you know, just being able to talk about faith, about like the deep things in life, about the sort of simple things in life, and just I think one of the gifts of Christianity is that God's called us to friendship with Him and with each other, and so I just love that. I just love making those bonds of friendship with
Yeah.
people.
And the second part is the most challenging part for
Certainly.
you of the priesthood. It's 2024 is a challenging year. We're living in
Yeah.
challenging times.
Yes.
Yeah, I think part of one thing that's challenging is that we're so conditioned in our culture to think of success as sort of like utilitarian numerical growth, and certainly numbers are real things, but like the call of a priest is not to sort of like literally get more butts and seats at church or something like that. So you can think in a sort of very practical way, and so the challenging thing has been to make sure that I don't fall into that trap, that I instead know that like my call is to worship God and to serve this city and this neighborhood, you know, to baptize the children that are brought to us, to marry those that come to us, to bury the
Not
dead.
about numbers. It's
Not.
about
I mean,
people.
you know, the numbers are like we pray to God that the things grow, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
So you know, the point is to do the work God's called us to do, which
Connect.
is simpler. Yeah,
I wanted to ask you a question about devotion
certainly.
and the idea of devotion. And you straddle that idea in a very public way as a priest, but it is also a personal exercise, and in a very public sense. You know, every Sunday, every time you walk into that church, it is an exercise in a public, almost like a public duty, really.
Yeah.
But yet it's more than that. What does that look like for you? I think if I'm remembering an artist who said, is it a ministry or is it a show? And how do you sort of wrangle that
Yeah.
for yourself?
Well, I mean, one of the interesting things about the sort of history of Anglican worship was that, like, in the beginning of the English Reformation, one of the main shifts was that the priest was called to twice daily ring the church bells in the parish church and to call people to prayer and open up the scriptures to them, right? You know, these are people that this is before the printing press, or the sort of as the printing press was just starting, to give people access to the Word of God and to prayer daily, and to, you know, bring them into that. And I felt this. I think some of the joy is based in the fact that I felt the lack of this when I was on tour so much. You know, we live in a fragmented world, but then beyond that, like going on tour, you're sort of literally rootless, right? You're moving from place to place. It's hard to find sort of stability. It's hard to find like groundedness, and that's why I think bands go crazy. It's not because they like want to party and like drugs are great. They like literally are just lacking any sort of centeredness and rootedness. And so I felt that need really profoundly on tour. And so I would like run out after sound check and try to find a church to say evening prayer in, because I needed to like be rooted and grounded. And so I think that sort of real palpable sense of need is a big part of my, you know, the fact that what we offer is not just sort of a nice thing to do or something, but that it's actually grounded in some sort of basic human need for rootedness in right orientation to God, I guess, to be sort of fancy theologically. So, yeah.
This is All Things Savannah. We're coming to you from the Bluff Hotel, Twin Spades Lounge, 630 West Bay Street, Historic District, downtown Savannah. Danielle Oak, Frank Morrow, Father Jonathan Jameson of St. John's Episcopal Church, Madison Square, Historic District, Savannah, telling us about his life, which is really interesting and amazing, actually. What does a priest do to relax and in downtime?
Yeah.
You carry a lot of heavy burdens just by the position, so what do
Yeah.
you do to relax?
You know, there's a few things. One thing, I'm starting to play tennis a lot more again, which is fun. So, and my kids are starting to play, and my wife as well. So that's been fun, just to sort of do that, stay active. I'm almost in my 40s, and so I need to stay active. Don't want to just sit at a desk all day. I also just love walking around. Working downtown is such a blessing,
Isn't it?
just to walk and get out in the community and see the beauty. But also, for so long, music was my career. And so the last thing I wanted to do when I came home from tour was to play music. I'd spent all my time at church. Now I get to spend all my time at church as a career. So it's been fun to sort of re-engage with music in a purely, like a level of pure enjoyment. And so I've actually started playing with a great band in town, a singer named P.R. Newman, and he and some other guys have been supporting him, and so we played the El Rocco the other night. So
wow.
So it's been fun to sort of like just play music on a tour, purely, just the level of enjoyment again. Yeah, so that's been fun.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So talking about Savannah then, back to what brought us all here, actually.
Yeah.
So, tell us about this. How does Amy, your wife, feel? So just so we all understand, Amy actually she commutes to Montreal.
Yes.
Okay. What is it,
Yeah.
every 2 weeks or?
Thankfully not, but close.
Okay.
Every month, which is almost every 3 weeks, because it's like 3 weeks
Right.
of a break, and then she spends 1 week up there a month, basically. And she is the creative director for 2 brands. One's called Garage, which is in the States, and the other one's called Dynamite, which is sort of contemporary brand that's mainly in Canada.
Yeah.
And she loves it. And when we moved down here, sorry, there's a second part to that question. Did you have a second part, further aspect to it?
Well, I just, she is in another world.
Yes.
And she's also in Canada for a chunk of time.
Yeah.
How has that affected how you all have been able to graft yourself into Savannah? I think for the kids, because your kids are under the age of 10, right?
So 10 and 7.
10 and 7, okay. So,
Young.
they're young enough, I think, that they can probably adapt fairly easily.
They did,
But how does that affect you guys?
Well, thankfully, my concern moving here was that, first we came, and I was immediately like, this is the coolest place I've ever been. And even before we came, I thought Savannah would be the perfect place for us to be. I just feel like it's the right mix of sort of culture and sort of tight-knit community. So I had a sense that this was the right place. But, again, back to what I said earlier, I thought, not going to happen. We'll see. But when we first came, Amy wasn't totally convinced. It was weird. But then something changed her mind. She thought, I think we should do it. And so step by step, we were able to do it. And now she just loves Savannah. She's just like fallen in love with it. And the kids have made just wonderful friends, both at church and at their school, and in the community, playing baseball and soccer and gymnastics or whatever. So I think the challenge, certainly commuting to Montreal is a challenge. We wish there was a direct flight, but
there's not.
Yeah, there's not.
That's
There's
right.
not. So, but she's. I think the fact that Savannah's been a good thing makes it worth it for her, and she also does love her job, and she, it's very, she's good at it, and so it's working. But but it's definitely made it an interesting time of settling in, right. In that way.
Now, Jonathan, is this your first parish? Okay.
Technically, yes. I was a sort of assistant, like a non-stipendiary assistant in Montreal at our church that we were at there. But this is the first position. So
So it's a silly thing to ask because of course it's very obvious. There's a huge difference between Montreal and Savannah in a million different ways.
Yep.
But of course, we think Savannah is extra special. And
Yes,
Right.
we do.
Yeah.
super wonderful.
Absolutely. We talk
So
about it every program.
We know that you're going to say the people
The bagels
here.
aren't as good
Oh,
here as they
okay.
are in Montreal. So
Can't
I
have
will
everything.
say, yeah.
Fair enough, fair enough. But we just know that you're going to say the people here are extraordinarily wonderful and exceptional in every way. And
Right.
it's been delightful to be in a parish here as opposed to anywhere else, right?
Well, I mean, I will be honest with you. When we've never lived in the South before, right? And so I'm from California. I have a certain sort of Californian
Attitude?
yeah, like
Vibe.
informalism, I guess.
Yes,
Sort of like I'm just sort
yes.
of. And my wife's from Philly, from sort of inner city Philly, very different place too, right?
Yeah.
And so we thought, how is this going to work? How are we
Right.
going to fit in culturally? Are they going to accept us? And it's just been sort of unbelievably surprising just how welcoming both the church and just the wider community has been. Just we've instantly made such close, deep relationships. Like not in the sense that you hear the sort of trope about Southerners where they're nice to your face and then say things behind your back. But we really haven't found that to be the case. Like
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we just don't. Maybe they're very good at hiding it. But
Right now.
they've been very, very welcoming, and it's been a blessing. So we feel at home.
Oh, that's
even
fantastic.
though it's a new home for us. Yeah.
So glad.
Yeah.
I mean, we feel the same way.
We
Yeah.
certainly do.
Yeah.
We certainly do.
Yeah.
We were bitten by whatever the bug is down here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it's the
once it
sand
gets
gnats.
you,
That's the
It's
one.
the
is that
sand
what it is? We have been taken away by the sand gnats, probably never to leave, which is okay
Yeah.
with us,
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking your time. I know you're a busy man, so we
Yeah.
appreciate you coming over here and
No
spending a
worries.
little time
Middle of Holy Week, but it's great to
unveiling your
talk
life
with
for
you all.
us. We're really happy about that, and we hope you come back another time and talk some more.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy. Yeah.
Father Jonathan Jameson of St. John's Episcopal Church in Savannah. Take a look. It's a great building and a great parish, and it's on Madison Square.
So, should we talk about our next show?
Sure, why not? A week from today, we have Katie Thomas Young. You may or may not know her name, but she's been written about in publications in business. She is the CEO of Bloom Consulting in Savannah, and she is all about marketing and social media. She is really a guru and sort of like one of the top women in the state of Georgia for that particular profession. So she's got a lot to say, and we're going to get into that with her next time around.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, well, let's do this again.
We will, and we want to thank our staff today, the tech team, Talia Bonilla, Maria Oliver, and Riley Sandifer. They pulled it all together, and
Yes,
we thank you
thank
guys
you.
so much for putting us on here today. We'll see you next time.